Hi folks, we're going to take a look at page 18, number 16. So let's take a look at the question here. So it says Ramona has a total of $5,000 to invest, and she invests it in two accounts. So one account pays 5% interest yearly, and the other one 7.2% interest yearly. Okay, and then they tell us that she has $349 of total interest at the end of the year. Okay, now here when they talk about simple interest, well, what it means is that every year she makes the same interest. Okay, so just every year she makes 5% of the original amount, and here 7.2% of the original amount. Okay, and what they want to know is how much was invested at each rate. So she invests this $5,000 into two accounts. We want to know how much in each account. Okay, so let's look at how we solve this problem. Okay, so I've just recapped it here, that total 5,000, these two accounts, and the other piece of information they tell us is that at the end of the year, she gets $349 in interest. Okay, so the first thing we have to do when we're solving this problem, obviously, is to come up with equations to solve it. And step one is to determine what our unknowns are. And often, the question itself gives us an idea as to what the unknowns should be. What is it we're looking for? We're looking for how much was invested at each rate. So that's how I'm going to define my unknowns. Okay, so I'm going to say let x, and you can use any variable you like, but I'll use x. Well, let x be the amount invested at 5%. Okay, so in that first account, and I'll let y be the amount. So here this is the ditto sign, means just what I wrote above, saves me from having to rewrite it again, and y will be the amount invested at 7.2%. Okay, so these two things represent how much money was invested. Okay, so this is where I think we can get our first equation pretty easily, because they tell us that the total is $5,000. So if I take the amount invested in the first account and I add it to the amount invested in the second account, I get the total of $5,000. And lo and behold, we have an equation. Okay? But as we've seen, we can't solve an equation that has two unknowns. So that means we need a second equation. And so this is where that other piece of information comes into play. So this tells us how much we've invested. The second piece of information tells me how much interest she's earned. Okay? And so this is going to help us come out with a second equation. So this is the total interest. So the way we can find the total interest is to figure out what was the interest from the first account, and then we're going to add that to the interest from the second account to give us our total. So this is where we try to remember, how do we work with percentages? So at the end of the year, she's going to get 5% of whatever she invested. And how do we calculate 5% of something? We multiply it by 0.05. So I'm going to take 0.05 and I'm going to multiply it by how much she invested, which I don't know. That's my variable x. So this expression here represents the interest from the first account. And then I'm going to add that to the interest from the second account. And that's 7.2% times whatever she invested, which again is an unknown. So I'm going to add to that 7.2%, which is 0.072, times however much she invested in the second account. So this is her interest from the first account plus the interest from the second account, gives us a total of $349 of interest. And here we have a system of equations. Okay? Now this is a system of equations for which substitution is a good candidate, because I look at these two variables and they both have coefficients of 1. Okay? So let's go through our process. Our process, step 1, is to isolate one of the variables. I'm clearly going to work with equation 1 here, and I can isolate x or y. I'll isolate y. So bring the x to the other side is going to be 5,000 minus x. Step 2 is to input or substitute the y value in the second equation by 5,000 minus x. So I create a new equation, 0.05x plus 0.072 times, replace y by 5,000 minus x, whoops, there we go, and that's equal to 349. And now I've got an equation that has only one variable. So step 3 is to solve this equation. Okay, here we have to do a bit of work, and obviously a little more annoying because there's all these decimals, but I do it in the same way. First I simplify this side, so I have to distribute these numbers. So here let's calculate 0.072 times 5,000 is equal to 360. Okay, so this is 360 minus, multiply that, 0.072 times x equals 349. I'm going to keep all the variables on this side, bring all the numbers to the other side. So 0.05 minus 0.072. So 0.05 minus 0.072 is equal to 0.022. Okay, so negative 0.022 equals, and 349 minus 60, well, that I can do in my head, that's just negative 11. Whoops, I forgot the x here. Okay, and now the last step is to divide both sides by negative 0.022. Okay, so we're going to do here negative 11 divided by negative 0.022, and we get 500. Okay, so we've now found one of our answers. So we now know that $500 was invested at 5%, and of course the last step is to determine the second variable. And how do I find y? Well, I can just go back to equation 1. I know that y is equal to 5,000 minus x, which I've now determined is 500, so that's 4,500. Okay, so here, since it's not a point of intersection that I'm looking for, I don't need to state it as a point of intersection, but I do need to state what this means. So it means that $500 was invested at 5%, okay, and $4,500 was invested at 7.2%. So at the end, you should state what these answers actually mean. Okay, so let's just do a recap. Okay, step number 1 was to realize that we've got a total amount of money that's being split up into 2 accounts. Okay, and what we were looking for was how much money was invested. So that allowed us to determine what our unknowns should be, and from there we could write our first equation, that if I add the amounts invested in each account, it gives me a total of 500, and then not enough information to solve, so we had to use the second piece of information, which was about how much interest was achieved. And so here we calculate the interest you get from the first account using our knowledge of percentages plus the interest from the second account, and that gives us a total of 349. And there's our system of equations, and we just followed the method of substitution to solve the system of equations, and then at the end we stated the answer to the question. Okay, that's it for this one.